In the middle of a busy real estate office in Atlanta, a black woman was slapped across the face by her supervisor for speaking up about discrimination. No one stepped in. No one said a word. She didn't cry. She didn't fight back. She simply stood still, turned around, and walked away. What no one realized was that before she left, she dropped off a letter, just a few lines. But those lines would reach the top floor. And the woman they had tried to silence would soon become the voice they couldn't ignore. What happened after that slap? Stay with us until the end to uncover the truth. Janice Cole, 35, was the marketing team lead at Broadwin and Nash, a prestigious real estate firm based in Atlanta. She wasn't just sharp, she was consistent, polished, and results-driven. Among a sea of executives in tailored suits and rehearsed charm, Janice stood out quietly, not by volume but by delivery. She was also one of the very few black women in a leadership role at headquarters. The office looked modern, inclusive, forward-thinking. But beneath the polished glass and diversity posters, the hierarchy was clear. Some doors stayed open longer than others. Some voices carried further. Janice often stayed after hours, finishing reports others had delegated to assistants. While her peers met clients or discussed strategy over lunch, she was double-checking numbers, refining decks, finalizing briefs. She noticed the patterns. Project invites she should have received never came. Meetings where her presence made sense didn't include her name. The reasons were always vague. Didn't seem necessary. We figured it was already covered. Her direct manager, Linda Cross, was sharp, guarded, and rarely spoke to Janice outside of formal reviews. When she did, her tone was clipped, professional, but always cold. Feedback was short. Praise was rare. In team meetings, Janice brought smart, creative ideas to the table. They were met with silence. Days later, the same ideas would resurface, tweaked slightly, credited to someone else. Still, she stayed grounded. She told herself to be patient, stay focused, stay excellent. She believed in merit. She believed that if she kept showing up, kept producing, someone would eventually notice. She didn't expect that it would take a slap for the room to finally look her in the eye. The signs were subtle at first, but only if you weren't the one living them. During a product launch planning session, Janice proposed a campaign centered on multicultural outreach, real stories from real communities, aimed at expanding beyond their typical market. Linda shut it down instantly. Too narrow, she said. Let's stay focused on our core. A week later, the same idea reappeared. Reworded, slightly reframed, presented by a white colleague. This time, it was met with applause. Brilliant, said Linda. Truly forward-thinking. Janice didn't say a word. Not long after, she was pulled into a side meeting and asked to write a full report for a separate department's project. You explain things so clearly, Linda said, smiling thinly. Just need your touch on this. It wasn't her project. It wasn't her team. But she did it anyway. At the company's internal celebration event, team leads were seated at the front, names printed on folded cards. Janice's name wasn't there. She was directed to sit with new hires. No explanation. No correction. When a glitch disrupted a digital campaign, the fault traced back to a third-party vendor. But in Monday's meeting, Linda pointed at Janice. You were overseeing this, right? She said. This reflects poorly on all of us. The room was silent. No one pushed back. Later that week, Janice overheard a conversation near the coffee machine. A colleague joked, she's good, sure. Just not really. Broadwin culture, you know. The others laughed. She didn't. Then came the whisper she wasn't meant to hear. They probably keep her around for the diversity metrics. Said like a fact. Said like it justified everything. Janice felt it, deepening. She wasn't just being overlooked, she was being isolated. Shifted to the margins, step by silent step. No one said it to her face. No one needed to. The distance spoke for them. Janice had stayed quiet long enough. After yet another project was reassigned without explanation, she wrote a measured email to Linda. She addressed the unequal workload and asked, respectfully, to be considered for a strategic task force forming that quarter. The reply came an hour later. Short. Cold. I'll consider it, Linda wrote, once you demonstrate a more collaborative attitude. Days later, in the weekly team meeting, Janice gently brought up the importance of incorporating diverse perspectives into marketing decisions. Linda didn't let her finish. We don't need to turn every discussion into a debate, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to quiet the room. That week, Janice's name was quietly removed from the team assigned to a major regional launch. No one explained why. No new assignment was given. One of her few allies at work pulled her aside. Linda's been telling people you're difficult. That you overstep. That you're trying to control everything. I thought you should know. The following Monday, the project schedule went out. Janice was listed under support tasks, data entry, formatting, minor edits. Her access to approval workflows had been revoked. She tried to brush it off. She tried to stay focused. Then came the monthly division meeting. She wasn't invited. When she asked about it, the response was casual. Oh, must have been a list error. Sorry about that. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. A method. Janice saw it now, clearly, fully. She was no longer being ignored. She was being erased. Slowly. Quietly. Deliberately. The tension reached its limit during a full team marketing meeting. The room was filled with managers, assistants, coordinators. The air was polite, stiff, rehearsed. Someone presented a summary of recent consumer behavior, numbers that didn't line up with Janice's own research. She raised her hand. Calmly. Confidently. I think we need to re-examine that last insight, she said. The data suggests a very different trend in our newer markets. Before she could explain further, Linda stood. Her tone dropped. I'm tired of this, she said, glaring. Tired of your tone. Tired of the way you make people uncomfortable. People shifted in their seats. No one spoke. Then Linda walked over. And without warning, slapped Janice across the face. The sound cracked the room open. But no one said a word. No one stood. No one gasped. Some lowered their eyes. Some stared into space. One person opened their laptop as if nothing had happened. Janice didn't move. She didn't touch her face. She didn't run out or raise her voice. She took a breath, turned back to her seat, and sat down. She opened her notebook. And started writing. The meeting resumed. Afterward, Janice went to her desk. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She simply gathered her things, slow, precise, like someone leaving a space they never truly belonged in. She opened a clean page. Wrote her resignation. Signed it. She didn't copy HR. She didn't send an email blast. She didn't announce anything to anyone. Before walking out of the building, she placed a single envelope into the internal suggestion box outside the elevator. No name on the front. No accusations inside. Just her truth. She wrote every detail, dates, remarks, incidents. She described the meetings, the dismissals, the silence. She included nothing dramatic, no self-praise, no rage. Only facts. Clear. unshaken. And at the end, one sentence, "I believe justice does not have to scream to be heard." Then she walked away. No one stopped her. No one noticed right away that she was gone. But soon, they would. A week passed. The office moved on, as it always did. Meetings resumed. Reports circulated. Janice's desk remained untouched. Then one morning, a junior HR assistant sorting through the internal suggestion box found the envelope. It wasn't labeled, but the weight of the folded pages inside caught her attention. She read it once, twice, then walked it to the administrative manager. The manager read in silence. Then walked it to the executive floor. Within 24 hours, the letter was on the desk of Ethan Burke, the CEO of Broadwin and Nash. He didn't skim. He didn't delegate. He read every word. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't angry. It didn't ask for anything. It was a quiet, detailed account. Dates. Incidents. Names. Tone. It was composed, but it hurt to read. Ethan didn't need to be told what it meant. He knew what it exposed. He called for a confidential review. Footage from internal meetings. Archived emails. HR records. Calendar logs. Meeting invites. All cross-checked. The picture was clear. A pattern. A silence. A wound left open too long. Linda Cross was called into a private meeting. She was suspended on the spot, pending a formal investigation. She was asked to explain everything. No press release. No denial. Just action. That afternoon, a letter went out from the executive board to Janice Cole. It didn't apologize with buzzwords. It acknowledged what had happened. It thanked her for her honesty. And it invited her back, this time, not as a department lead, but as vice president of brand strategy. A second letter followed, this one sent to every employee in the company. It was signed by Ethan Burke. A company cannot grow if those who speak the truth are punished for it. And silence is not a culture. It's a warning sign. A week later, Janice returned. Not for the title. Not for the recognition. But because she knew this, if she stayed silent, the silence would win. The following quarter, during the company's all-hands meeting, Janice stood on stage for the first time as a senior executive. She didn't speak about the slap. She didn't mention names or retell what had already been circulated in quiet conversations. Instead, she talked about quiet courage, the kind that often goes unnoticed, the kind that changes everything. "I didn't come back to manage," she said. "I came back to listen. To protect the people who've been ignored the same way I was." Her voice was calm, deliberate. She didn't raise it, but no one looked away. What she said landed because it was simple. And it was true. The recording of her speech was uploaded to the company's internal platform, then reposted across professional circles in the local business community. It wasn't dramatic. It was just honest. And that's what made it powerful. Within days, anonymous letters began arriving at HR employees who had never spoken up before, shared their own experiences, subtle acts of exclusion, quiet moments of bias, patterns they had never felt safe enough to name. This time, they were answered. Not with templates. With meetings. With policy reviews. With changes. A new internal committee was formed, focused on workplace equity, inclusion, and ethical leadership. Janice was appointed as lead advisor. Not to check a box, but to guide real accountability. Her first act was simple: listening sessions. No agendas. Just space for people to tell the truth. One afternoon, as she was gathering her things, a young employee stopped by her office. He looked nervous. Then said, "I was in the room that day. I saw everything. I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I was scared. But what you did, it changed me. Janice didn't lecture. She just nodded. Sometimes, being heard is enough. At the company's end-of-year celebration, names were called, trophies handed out, metrics applauded. Then came a pause. The final recognition wasn't for sales or innovation. It was a new award, Culture Icon of the Year. It went to Janice Cole. Not because she fought back, but because she stood still and let the truth speak. Janice Cole didn't shout. She didn't fight back. She didn't ask for sympathy. She let her actions speak. She let a letter, written with integrity, carry the words that needed to be said. This story isn't just about a slap. It's about a system that had grown comfortable with silence, and one person who chose to break that silence, not through anger, but through character. Janice won. Not because she was a victim, but because she refused to let indifference make her invisible. And because of her, an entire company was forced to change. If you've ever witnessed injustice in your workplace, ask yourself, what will you do? Stay quiet, or give truth a voice? If you believe fairness starts with courage, share this video. Like, leave a comment, and subscribe to Black Excellence so you won't miss the stories that awaken conscience and demand reflection. Thank you for watching until the end. We'll see you in the next story.